Digital greetings and a warm analog welcome to you. This is the Critical Android with another episode of the Critical Cast. Joining me today is a very special guest, not my friend Eric, not my friend Andres, not even my friend Brian. This is my dear sweet mother.
Hello.
Hi, Mom. How are you?
I'm pretty good.
I'm glad to have you here because we're going to talk about a subject that is near and dear to my mother's heart, and that's horror films. Now, when I was growing up, in the care of my mom, she would watch horror movies all the time and subjected myself and my younger brothers, who were much too young to be watching these films, to the terrifying sights of what she was watching on the television. I'm not going to doubt whether or not you were a good mother when it comes to that, but you did like horror movies quite a bit. Now, what draws you to them? Like, why do you enjoy them as much as you do?
I think probably because some of my best times when I was a child growing up was we used to have this thing called like Saturday matinee, and or on weekends I used to get to stay up late with my mother, and it'd be in the living room and sit on the couch and watch a horror movie, and it was great. I remember being so scared that when we were done that I'd say, "Mom, can you just sleep with me till I fall asleep?"
Well, that's sweet.
A lot of warm memories.
I guess so. The family that terrifies together stays together,
Yeah,
I guess.
Absolutely.
But you are, I would consider you to be kind of a modern-day expert on horror films. Not so much that like you memorize details or whatnot, but you've seen an awful lot of them, far more than I've ever seen. And I think that puts you into a special category of somebody who's qualified to talk about horror films from the last couple decades, dating back to, at the very least, the late 70s and early 80s. And plus, not to mention, knowing our grandmother, she used to watch classic horror films too, which would have brought you like films from a older generation too, as opposed to what you were watching when you were a kid growing up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, we're going to start off as customary when I have a guest on the show. We'll start off with your number 10. So if you want to go with that, and then we'll discuss from there and move our way on up the list. So what is your number 10?
Well, my number 10 is a movie with it starred Michael Ironside in it, and it's called Visiting Hours.
Yeah, you've told me about this movie before, and we won't go into specific spoilers to ruin the movie for people who haven't seen it, but what's the basic plot of this movie?
Well, the basic plot is this reporter gets sent to a hospital, and there is somebody that's been following her, and needless to say, she is admitted into the hospital for some surgery, and this maniac follows her there, and to me it is so creepy and so it just petrifies me, because as if anybody's ever been, I'm sure, has been in a hospital setting at nighttime, it can be real creepy, them halls and the quietness of it. And to this day, when I'm in a hospital, at nighttime, I always think of that movie, and it just it's very, very thrilling.
I've yet to watch. I know you've recommended it, but I will say that Michael Ironside, a very, very good character actor. People would probably recognize him even if they don't know the name. But he's an imposing figure, and he has a very gravelly, strong voice that can be quite horrifying. He was in a science fiction horror movie called Scanners, where he actually blows up a person's head with psychic powers. It's a specifically gory shot, but he's pretty much qualified for anything he's cast in based off of his imposing presence. And it's one of those movies that I want to watch because of him. Is there anything like particularly frightening about the movie besides like the atmosphere, or is it just kind of the combination of the realistic setting?
Yeah, well, the realistic setting, and just that you could picture this realistically happening, and the idea of this mad maniac running around, and is just the setting in itself. I mean, it's the dark halls, and to me it was just, to this day, like I said, I still think of it, and it's like, wow, it's just a petrifying situation. I really enjoyed that movie.
Now, for my number 10, I went with a TV movie that was one of the Stephen King adaptations, and I think this was the strongest of all those, that being the movie It. Now,
yeah, okay. It made my list, but it wasn't number 10.
okay, well, we'll talk a little bit more. I'll let you talk a bit more about it when it gets to you on your list. And one of the reasons why I put this is not so much that the movie is incredibly well acted, because there's some parts that could have been done a little bit better, but the presence of Tim Curry as Pennywise the clown is absolutely terrifying. He's great in the role. I absolutely love what he does, and just the whole idea of a clown that's preying on children is pretty devastating. And as I mentioned in a different list that I did with one of the other guests, Tim Curry's portrayal of Pennywise or It is really the highlight of this show. He's so villainous that years later, when the kids who originally faced him in their childhood try to get back together, they are terrified, and one of them commits suicide because he can't deal with the fact that Pennywise is back and they have to confront him.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And I'll let you talk more about it when it gets to your spot on the list. So until then, we'll head to your number 9, and what do you have listed there?
Well, for my number 9, I have an old classic called The Omen.
Ah, yes.
And I remember watching that when I watched it several times growing up, and it just it still frightens me to this day. It's just the idea of having a possessed child like that, and I just thought it was very well written. The acting was fantastic in it, and I just thought it was definitely a classic.
Who or what's the main plot of the movie for people who haven't seen it?
Well, wealthy couple. I believe he's the adopted father. I believe he's like a senator, or he's in politics, and they couldn't have children, so they adopted this boy. And as the boy, a lot of strange things happen, and as the boy's growing up,
I believe his name is Damien, right?
Yes, Damien. And right from the beginning, there's this scene where the nanny of the house, she takes care of the boy, and she hangs herself, and she calls attention to the boy and tells him, Damien, look at me, and she hangs herself. So right away in the beginning, there's it's real creepy, and
nothing starts off a movie like a good hanging.
yeah, and it just back in the day, I mean, it was there was things that happened in the movie that probably nobody had ever seen before. There was some was pretty graphic in its day, and I still think it holds up as being petrifying.
It is a classic, and it ties into the whole demonic entity thing, which was a popular theme in horror based at the time, especially because back in the 70s, and even before that, but still in the 70s, the culture in the United States was more religious, and there was more religious aspects to everyday life, whereas now it's more of a private thing, or some people just don't really talk about religion or find certain things creepy. But exorcisms still fascinate people, and the idea of demonic possession is still a popular topic in both film, news, and stories. So I can see why that would make the list.
Yeah, and I thought Lee Remick was I just thought she was fantastic in it. She played the mother, and I thought she was fantastic in it.
Yeah, good acting can seal a horror movie when it's a genre that's not really known for having strong acting. When you have like the noted scream queens of what they were called. My number 9 is a movie that it's newer than actually at this point in time it's the newest one on in the discussion, and that's the movie Final Destination. I don't know if you've seen this one.
Wasn't it with an airplane? They were on an airplane?
Yes.
Yes.
One of the reasons why, or the whole plot of Final Destination is basically that some kids are going on a plane trip from the United States to, I believe, Paris for basically like a school function, something like that. And one of the kids has a vision of the plane blowing up and everybody on board dying. And it was such a vivid vision that just struck him that he couldn't believe it. It was not just like some sort of a daydream. It was this very powerful force. So he convinces some of his friends and I think their teacher that they can't go on this plane because something terrible is going to happen. And then sure enough, it does blow up. And what the ultimate villain of this movie to say is death itself, because they find out that they should have been on there, and whatever divine intervention that happened that stopped them from getting onto that plane, death is going to try to come back for them to complete the task that it was supposed to have. So there's no concrete, tangible villain in this film like other horror movie franchises. Death itself is just trying to take the course of action that it was supposed to take. And in this movie, it's done very strongly. In the sequels, it's more gimmicky of like, oh, how are they going to die this time? But in the first film, it was, death has its course of action that it's going to take and is going to try to achieve its goals in any way possible.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely scary.
Yeah, it's the idea of... I guess what made the first movie interesting and why they extrapolate on the second is that they try to safeguard themselves, but death still finds a way to get them through unique means in order to finally kill the people who death feels should have died before. So you have these very sometimes complicated or unique ways that the people are killed off, and they take that to the extremes in the later films, but it gives you a sense of complete insecurity in the first film because everyone's trying to avoid death, but it's still coming for them, and there really is no safe spot.
Yeah, I'd like to watch that again. I don't know if I ever seen the whole movie through, but yeah, it definitely is creepy.
Yeah, so that's why I included it. But again, since there's no main villain or whatnot, and it's creepy. It's not explicitly scary, and the franchise definitely fell off the deep end. But for what it is, Final Destination is a strong and creative horror movie. But that will bring us to your number 8.
My number 8 is a movie starring Bette Davis, and it's I believe it was in the early 60s it came out. It was called The Nanny.
I have not heard of this. The only Nanny I remember is the Fran Drescher comedy that was on television in the 90s, but Bette Davis, a very famous actress. But what's this one about?
Oh, this one, to this day, it still holds up. I mean, really well. Bette Davis plays a nanny that, she had been a beloved nanny to this family, and the daughter grew up and she had her own family, so she had the nanny continue on to take care of her kids because the nanny had taken care of her when she was little. And anyways, the nanny had ended up having to leave the house one day for a quick minute for an emergency, and the little girl had ended up falling in the bathtub and hitting her head and drowned. And the little boy had actually seen this happen, and the nanny had tried to cover it up, and all through the movie, the little boy he hates this nanny, and he knows what she has done, and the nanny tries to. Well, I don't want to ruin the whole movie.
Yeah, don't go into too more specifics. Save some for people.
It's very, very creepy, and it's just I put it right up there as just one of Bette Davis's best performances. I thought it was an excellent horror movie.
I have not seen it all or even heard of it up until this point. So, with a class act like Bette Davis in it, I'm sure it's quite good.
It's very, very keeps you on the edge of your seat from beginning to end. So, it's without giving away very much more. It's definitely, I would recommend that movie to watch. Matter of fact, I almost put it up higher on the list.
My number 8 is from the zombie genre of films, and generally I'm not a huge fan of these kind of movies, but this one predates the more recent rise in zombie like horror franchises, and that's the movie 28 Days Later.
I never seen that.
Yeah, this one's directed by Danny Boyle, who's done a lot of other movies, and it stars Cillian Murphy, and it basically takes place in England, and it talks about a man who woke up from an accident. He was in a coma for a better part of a month, and he finds out that 28 days before he woke up, a virus outbreak had hit England that basically made everyone go completely mad and insane and start like trying to rip apart human bodies and attack each other. And it came from a science experiment they were doing on monkeys to try to unlock, I guess, some sort of primal instinct within them, and it gets cross-contaminated with human beings, and the virus just spreads. So it's a zombie movie, but they're not typical like slow-moving, lumbering zombies, because technically these people aren't dead, so their bodies are still like functional, and that makes them quicker, faster, and even though they're not intelligent because they're consumed with primal rage, they recognize stimulus like light and sound and will head for things in order to essentially rip apart anything that they find. So you have these fast-moving running zombies, which again, in most classic zombie horror...
Yeah, exactly, right. You're not scared because you could outrun them.
Yeah, you could outwalk them if you wanted to. A power walker would have no problem surviving a normal zombie situation. But here, the zombies are much faster, and they pose a bigger threat. And the entire movie is well done in showing some of the more despicable parts of human nature, how the government responds to it, how people in situations like this react, and it's a good social commentary at the same time that it is a good zombie movie. Probably one of the better zombie movies to come out.
Now, see, I'll have to watch that because I'm not a big fan of zombie movies for the reason that you stated, that they're usually, well, I find them very corny usually because they're very slow, and it just wasn't exciting for me.
Well, if you like your British movies with a side of zombies in it, then I suppose this is a good place to go. And that takes us now to, I believe, number 7.
Yeah, number 7. Well, I'll tell you, I have An American Werewolf in London as my number 7.
I remember this movie from childhood, and I remember you commenting on it, that one of the better parts about it was the special effects for the transformation sequence that happens in this film.
Yes. And at the time, that was, it was groundbreaking special effects, and they still hold up.
Yeah, all things considered, quite good for when this movie came out in the 80s.
I thought, yes, there was some comedy in it, and but I thought the comedy was perfect because I thought it would have been absolutely horrifying if there hadn't been any comedy in it. I think it was a really scary movie. Well done.
I remember one sequence, and it's basically a typical werewolf story about a guy who's, it kind of explains itself in the title, an American who gets inflicted into turning into a werewolf while he's in London. And the incidents that happened because of this, and like in one situation, if I remember correctly, he turns into a werewolf, goes to a zoo, and eats the animals or attacks animals there. And after the night is over and he transforms back, he wakes up naked in the zoo and has to try to keep hiding behind things so he can try to get someplace and get some clothes back. But it's a funny scene, and I don't remember much of the plot of the film since it's been so long since I saw it.
It has for me too, but I do remember one particular really funny part was I can't remember if the werewolf was Jack. I know one of the guys' names was Jack. It's been that long since I watched it. And there was a movie, they were sitting in a movie theater, and that was a really funny part in the movie where they were sitting next to each other in the movie theater, and it was just, there was a lot of comedy to it. It was real funny.
There were other werewolf movies that I was tempted to put on the list and didn't, since I didn't think they were that scary. And I don't know if any of them show up on your list. First one that came to mind was Silver Bullet.
Yeah, I thought of that too.
Yeah, but it's not a very terrifying movie. It's very notable for the chemistry that you see between the two main stars, Gary Busey and Corey Haim. They have a really good relationship, and it's based off a Stephen King novella, short story. And the other one that I was tempted to put on there was Wolf, though that wasn't very scary either, with Jack Nicholson. and he basically plays a werewolf. I think Michelle Pfeiffer
That
is
was
the
a really
romantic
good
lead.
one.
Yeah, and James Spader plays the antagonist in the film, and it's good, but it's not a frightening movie. But I mostly don't find werewolf mythology to be that scary. But American Werewolf, and I think American Werewolf in London kind of knows that too. It's like, yeah, well, we're not trying to be that scary, but we'll throw some horror elements in here.
Yeah, I thought it was probably one of the best as far as werewolf movies go. I thought it was one of the best.
Speaking of movies that you introduced me to as a child, number 7, and this movie came out in 95, I'm pretty sure, which means I was only 10, 11 years old when you had us see this movie. And it's the Wes Craven film Scream.
Scream. Wait a second. Wasn't that Scream? I'm trying to think. No,
What's your favorite scary movie? The caller on the phone?
Yes, the caller on the phone. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
Not when I say caller on the phone, not like the classic when a stranger calls about,
No,
the calls coming from inside the house.
Drew Barrymore was in that one.
Yes,
Scream,
and she
yes.
gets killed off within the first 10 minutes of the film.
Yeah.
This movie basically stars Neve Campbell as a girl, name I can't remember, but her mother was killed earlier on in the series, before this starts, and there's this backstory about how her mother was killed, what was going on, and there's somebody else who is wreaking havoc through the town as a serial killer with this, what they call the ghost face mask. And the movie has a lot of twists and turns in trying to figure out who did it. They give you a lot of red herrings, but it's also kind of got some comedic elements to it because the film's very much aware that it's a horror movie and keeps trying to pull like the same kind of things you would normally see from a horror movie, but then use them as like a false lead to try to get you to think something else about it.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's funny you mentioned that about these horror movies where there's the telephone sequel in there that makes it so scary. I think that all came back from, like, in the early 70s, it was a terrifying thing. You watch the movie now and you're like, wow, that, it wasn't very well written, but there was a horrifying scene in this movie.
When a Stranger Calls, I think it was.
No, Are You in the House Alone? It was called.
Oh.
And the woman was on the phone, and she kept getting these prank phone calls, and she was babysitting.
Yes, that's actually called When a Stranger Calls.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yes.
And he said, have you checked the kids?
Yes.
Okay.
And
all
then
right.
she calls
Yeah.
the police, and the police find out the call's coming from inside the house.
From upstairs,
Yes.
yeah. Yeah, okay. So that was the name of it, When a Stranger Calls.
Yes, it's
Okay.
not a very well-written film, but the whole idea of the killer communicating over the phone like that is something that Scream alludes to in that respect.
And a teenage girl babysitting in the house.
Yep.
And, just you could feel that situation.
Yeah, it's very well done for all of those purposes. So that's why Scream makes my number 7. It's got some scary moments into it, legitimately scary, but it's also just a well-crafted horror movie that came out of the 90s, and that was a rare thing to find during that decade.
Yeah. I didn't even know you knew that movie.
Yeah, you're the one who made me watch it as like an 11-year-old.
Okay. All right.
For fun trivia facts, Henry Winkler, otherwise known as Fonzie, plays the role of the principal in the film. The principal of the school.
Wow, it's been I've forgotten. It's been so long since I've seen it.
She's like, you'll watch. Is that goddamn Fonzie is the principal? It's like, yes, it is.
Oh, you make me want to watch it again now.
See, that's the whole point of this, is to try to create interest in horror films.
You've mentioned 2 so far. I'm going to go back and rewatch.
Well, the next one would be our number 6 on the list, so we'll have you continue along.
That's where it came in for me.
Okay, it was at number 6 for you.
Yeah, it was at number 6 for me. And
Now, did you read the book that it was based off of?
no, I never read the book.
Okay, because it's like a 1,000-page tome or whatnot. And but what did you like about the film?
I thought it was. I thought it really played upon fear for children with clowns. I just thought it was petrifying, and how it stalked the kids, and I just thought it was. And the sewer scene where the clown was, "Hey kid,
Oh, yeah.
want a balloon?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do they float? Oh, yes, Georgie. They float.
Everything floats down here.
And when you're down here, you'll float Two!
Yes. The poor little boy with the boat in the drain, with
Yeah.
the sewer. Yeah. With his little boat going down the street. And
Yeah, it's a good scene.
yeah.
And there's a lot of other ones too, like when they're going through that picture album and the picture like starts to actually come to life and Pennywise comes out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the drain in the bathroom.
Oh yeah, that was another good one too.
Yeah, that was a good part.
Yeah, so it's still, like I said, if you rewatch it, some of the acting doesn't hold up. The kids actually do a really good job. Like the child actors for the film are really strong, but the adult acting I think could have been a bit better. But like you said, it preys off of the fear of that children would have, which I think makes it relatable to everybody because we've all been kids before.
Yeah, I remember watching it with your brother, and he had me take his clown picture down off his wall after we watched that. Of course, he was probably only about 5'6" at that time. But
Yeah, I don't know why you were letting him watch that movie.
he loved it. He loved it. Yeah,
He loved it
just
so
like
much
that.
it scarred him enough to take down the
Yeah,
pictures in the room.
absolutely. He would just let's watch that. He'd say.
Well, he's always been a bit of a masochist for that stuff, but my number 6 is a film that I only recently saw, but and I think it was either late 80s, early 90s it came out, and that's the movie Candyman.
Oh yeah, John Lithgow. Wasn't it John Lithgow?
I don't remember if John Lithgow was in it because I know the female lead is Virginia Madsen, and Tony Todd is the large African American man who's in it as the imposing Candyman himself. Maybe I don't remember Lithgow being in it, but I could be wrong. Actually, since I've got a computer right here,
Yeah, because I swore John Lithgow was in there.
he could be, and I just don't remember it because it's been a long time since I
Yeah.
saw it. I just remember it being a quality horror
Forgot
film.
about Candyman.
Oh, see, you don't want to forget about Candyman. Basically, it involves a female investigator who is trying to look into a local urban legend about the Candyman. This like figure, or this I don't want to say figure, but a legend that kids are talking about. And no, John Lithgow is not listed as being in this, so no. It does star, like I said, Tony Todd as Candyman, Xander Berkeley as Trevor Lyle, and a few other people, but sadly no John Lithgow, though he's good in pretty much anything.
Did they have sequels to Candyman?
They did have sequels to Candyman.
Was he in the sequel? Because I really thought he was in.
I sincerely doubt he was in one of the sequels, because generally those films are they tend to be terrible. I don't think he would do it. However, I will check. The first sequel was Candyman: Farewell to the Flesh, and
No, I don't think it was.
no, he's definitely not in that one. And then the third one was Candyman 3: Day of the Dead. They were getting really original, which was a straight-to-DVD release, and yes, the most notable name on there is Ernie Hudson, who was one of the Ghostbusters. So you know, not a big movie there. But I will say that the first two films, well, the first one more so, but the second one still had this guy working on it. But the soundtrack to the movies was done by a composer named Philip Glass, who is kind of this minimalist composer. The way that he composes things is a very kind of quiet, downbeat atmosphere that gets considerably creepy. And to me, this helped out the movie considerably. Plus, the entire idea of, you know, like saying Candyman into a mirror 3 times, like the Bloody Mary legend, is what spurs on this film. And it is legitimately creepy and enjoyable because of the presence of the Candyman and the entire idea that, you know, you could rise him from wherever he comes from through such a simple means.
Yeah, I think I'm getting that confused with. I don't know if I have seen Candyman. I think I'm getting it confused. There was a horror movie that John Lithgow played in, and for some reason I thought it was the Candyman.
Well, I'll look through John Lithgow's films here, and we'll see if we can find something that fits. Let's see what movies he's been in, because it's been quite a few.
Yeah.
But we'll try to see something here, and maybe one of them will come up. You don't mean... I'm assuming you don't accidentally mean the movie Cliffhanger with Sylvester Stallone.
No. No.
And I'm assuming you also don't mean Footloose, right?
No, or Terms of Endearment. I don't mean that either.
He was in Twilight Zone, the movie.
No, that's not the one I'm thinking of.
I know what horror movie you meant. Henry and the Hendersons.
No. But that was a good movie.
He was quite good in it. There's a movie called Obsession.
No, that's not the one I'm thinking of.
It's a psychological thriller. I doubt it was The Big Fix, Rich Kids, all that jazz, Blowout, Dancing as Fast as I Can, 2010, I don't know what movie that was. The Manhattan Project, Distant Thunder, Out Cold, Ricochet, Raising Cain.
Maybe that was it, Raising Cain. Maybe.
It could be. He plays a doctor in it. Dr. Carter Nix is a respected child psychologist. His wife, Jenny, becomes concerned that Carter is obsessively studying their daughter, Amy, regards her like a scientist tracking the development of his creation, but Carter himself suffers from multiple personality disorder, consisting of Kane, a street hustler, Josh, a shy 10-year-old boy, and Margot, a middle-aged nanny. So, did John Lithgow have a multiple personality disorder in this movie you saw?
It's been... I don't even really know if that was the one.
Well, then it probably wasn't. But no, we'll explore that at another point in time.
Yeah, that'd be worth checking into, because I seem to remember him.
He was in a movie called The Wrong Man, as opposed to The Candyman, but I don't think that's it either.
No.
Oh, well. But anyway, Candyman is a good movie, and I'd recommend checking it out, and especially for you, Mom, who can't seem to remember it.
Yeah, I'll have to check. Now there's 3 I gotta check out.
Yeah, or just go back to watching Henry and the Hendersons.
Yeah, always.
Because that's a classic.
That was good. Nice family movie.
Yes, and not scary, but still, it's a classic.
Yes.
But we'll get back into films that you do know as we enter into the top half of the list with your number 5.
My number 5 was Poltergeist.
This is funny, because that is my number 5.
Is it really? Yes. Is it? Yeah, apple don't fall far from the tree. Yeah, isn't that something? That was your number 5.
Yes.
Wow.
We pegged it exact.
Yeah. What did you think about it when you saw it? I mean, did you find it incredibly scary? Because I did.
I found it suitably scary, but one of the things that I think is remarkable about the movie is that if you watch it, you realize that there are no on-screen deaths that occur in the film. No one dies during the course of the movie. And I think that's a really remarkable thing when you think about how most horror movies revolve around death. But this one, no one dies during the course of the film. And it's all about, the basic plot of the film is that there's a family that, has this house that they're living in, and these very paranormal circumstances start happening. Furniture being moved around, and their young daughter, Carol Ann, communicates with a spirit unknowingly through a television that's on a static screen, and it acts as a conduit that allows not only spirits into the house, but eventually she gets sucked into this realm by those spirits, and it's about the family's attempt to try to not only get her back, but uncover what's been happening in this house. And it stars Craig T. Nelson, who you might remember from Coach, and I want to say it's Jo Beth Williams.
I think it is Jo Beth Williams
who plays the mother. But it's a very strong film. I'll have you talk about your thoughts on it too. But one of the interesting things about this movie too is that it's directed by Tobe Hooper, but Steven Spielberg was the producer on the film, and there's a bunch of discussions that go on and debates that rage over whether or not Spielberg actually directed this film himself, because it has a lot of the qualities that a Spielberg movie has in terms of the family relations and things like that, and the sense of mystery and kind of wonder, if you will. But it's a legitimately frightening film, especially for one that, like I said, has no gore in it. And I'll let you talk about your thoughts on it.
Well, one thing I remember from watching that movie is back in the day, when I was growing up, stations really did sign off the air. And so you'd have that screen where, you would get the what am I thinking of? The
static.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but you'd always have
the national anthem.
The national anthem, right. And then you'd get the static and it would go off the air. Well, for a long time, even there were still a few stations that would do that. And because we didn't have cable back in the 70s. But even when that movie came out, once in a while, there were still a couple stations that would sign off the air at night. And I remember thinking of that movie and getting a little spooked.
Yeah, because the whole idea lingers.
Yeah, so I mean, I just thought it was so well written, and but that particular scene that always stuck with me to this day. I always remember that about the station that would go into the static, and but I thought it was just a really, really good movie.
There's also there's the famous scene where Carol Ann is looking at the TV and then looks back behind her to her parents' bed.
They're here.
They're here.
Yeah, they're here.
And it also provided a good role for the actress Zelda Rubinstein, who plays the medium.
Yeah. I think she's passed away now.
Yeah, she died a few years ago, but it was a good role for her. A very iconic role as the medium that tries to help them get Carol Ann back.
And the chairs, when the chairs were stacked in the kitchen.
Yes.
I thought that was a great scene. When
the mother basically looks away to get something out of the cabinet, and as soon as she looks back, all the chairs in the kitchen are stacked up on top of the table.
Remember when Craig T. Nelson got out of work and she's like, come here, I gotta show you something.
Oh yeah, with the kid in the helmet.
Across the floor, yeah. And she's rubbing her bottom.
Yes.
My ass. Yeah.
I don't know why the ghost went through that much trouble to pull pranks through the house. But no, it's a really strong movie.
Oh, don't forget the part with the remote control. Remember when they were trying to watch the football game and the neighbor was trying to watch something else? Mm-hmm. And I mean, there was just so many good parts in that. And they went to the next door neighbors and they were saying, have you had any strange occurrences here? And neighbor's like, no, none here. And it was just, there was a lot of funny parts to it. And
yeah, it's a charming movie as much as it is a scary one.
Yeah. And it ended well. They got the little girl back.
Yeah, in case, spoiler warning, they get Carol Ann back. But also, the other thing that I liked about the film was it kind of put into cultural belief, don't build things on Indian burial grounds.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
There's that great scene near the end where Craig T. Nelson confronts the realtor or the developer of the area, and it's just like, you only moved the headstones! You left the bodies and you moved the headstones!
Yeah.
It's a great movie. Strongly recommend if you haven't seen it. They did a remake of it just last year that I did not see. Probably won't. But the original, some of the special effects don't quite hold up since things grow and change. But the acting and the story holds up remarkably well.
You know what's interesting about that movie is two of those characters, unfortunately, had passed away at very young.
Yeah, the movie was... hell, we've got time. We'll talk about it. The movie is rumored to be cursed. And one of the reasons why that thought came to be was because the actress who plays Carol Ann, I think it's... her last name is Rourke, I believe.
Heather O'Rourke.
Heather O'Rourke, thank you. She passed away during the filming of the third movie from an odd... I think it was a stomach cancer or something like that.
Wasn't it a bowel perforation?
It could have been that. I think it was that. It was something involving... involving the intestines.
But don't take my word for it, because I'm the one that told you John Lithgow was in Candyman.
Oh, yeah, that is a good point. But you might be right about Heather O'Rourke here. I'll look it up since, what else do we have to do? Heather O'Rourke passed away from septic shock and a misdiagnosed intestinal stenosis, which is a narrowing in a blood vessel. So basically, it's more related to what you said than what I said. But yeah, she passed away suddenly. And one of the rumors as to why this movie is supposedly cursed is because there's this scene in the first film where the mom is out in the front yard and in this massive rainstorm, and the rain has unearthed bodies and skeletons that are out in the yard. And they actually used real skeletons in that scene, real human remains, because it was literally...
Oh, that's creepy.
It was literally cheaper to get the human bones, actual human bones, than it was to get fake skeletons made out of...
So they actually used cadaver bones?
They used real human bones, yes. Ooh. And that's where the supposed curse from the film stems from, that belief that because they used actual human bones... that the movie was cursed.
I never heard about that.
Yeah, it's and that the other thing too, and this give credit to Spielberg about this, is that in that scene where she's in the water with these bones, they had a lot of lights around to light the scene properly, and she was absolutely terrified of being in that scene because she was afraid of one of the lights falling into the water and getting electrocuted, which, you know, it kind of makes, it's a logical thing to be afraid of. Jo Beth Williams just did not want to be in that scene,